Alright, so this is that foam I was talking about. Boiling pretty hard now, and the foam's starting to rise up. So what you want to do, you want to take the heat, kick it down a little bit, get rid of that foam. Alright, bring the heat back up. Let's go ahead and start our timer. 1 hour. Now during this 1 hour, you really shouldn't leave this alone because it could boil over if you're using a smaller kettle than I am, stock pot rather. So just stay near it, let it brew up for an hour. Right now I've got about 20 minutes left in the boil here. I'm going to take the little Whirlfloc tablet, the cleaning agent I mentioned earlier, and drop that right in there. And when you've got about a minute or so left in the boil, you want to go ahead and add your finishing hops to it. Just go ahead and dump them in there and let that finish off for another minute. Next we're going to look at how we can cool this thing off. We got to get it down to about like 130 degrees or so. Then we're going to add it to a fermenter with a couple of gallons of water into it to cool it down to hopefully around 80 or so degrees. If we can get it lower than that, closer to the fermentation temperature of the yeast, then that'll be good too. Alright, so the boiling is complete, so I went ahead and I took the kettle and put it into the sink to cool off. I've got a lot of ice that I pre-made just for the cooling off part, so I'm just going to pour it right in here in the sink to help cool it off. And through the miracle of video editing, ta-da, there's my ice. Now I'm just going to take and put some water in there, some cold water. What we're going to try to do is cool this down as much as possible, as quickly as possible. Right, the next thing we're going to have to do, we're going to have to take everything that's in our fermenter bucket that's been sanitizing for the past hour or so, empty it out, and get things ready for the beer to go in, or the wort as it's called now. At this point, nothing unsanitary should come into contact with the wort. So a little trick that I use to check the temperature, I notice that all the ice is melted in there. I just take my probe thermometer, check the temperature that way, because theoretically speaking, the temperature of the water should be at least approaching the temperature of the wort inside the pot there. And it's just about right. I'd say I'm going to let it cool a little bit more before I stick it in the fermenter. I just emptied the fermenter out not too long ago, and it's sanitary. You can't see it at all on here, but it's still got a little bit of liquid left in there, and I want to give that time to evaporate. I put all my clean utensils, the spoon I'm going to stir it with, the pieces of the airlock you see there, and the hydrometer on a napkin to air dry. As soon as this gets to a decent temperature, then I'm going to go ahead and stick it in the fermenter. It looks like it's about there. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes. Okay, the wort cooled down. The wort, rather. That's supposed to be pronounced, I guess. I went ahead and poured it into the fermenter. Now I'm just going to top it off up to that 5-gallon mark with what water I have left. Alright, so if I look at the temperature reading on this, you can't really make it out all that well on the camera, but it's hovering at between like 79 and 81 degrees, so that's pretty good for starting the fermentation process. But first, I want to use my hydrometer to take the initial gravity reading of the beer. Just kind of let that sit in there, wait till it levels out. You're going to want to take that number that is at the watermark and write that down. So somewhere around 20, I guess. So that would be, if you read it, it's 1.020, I think is the way you're supposed to read it, which equates to roughly like 4% alcohol, potentially. But what I'm going to do is, I don't really trust that reading because I think there's a lot of water at the top of this. I think that's going to affect it. So I'm going to take my spoon and kind of stir things up a bit. You also want to do this anyway to make sure that it is properly aerated in there. You got plenty of oxygen in there so that the yeast can go to town on that sugar that was made during the boiling process. Try not to break the hydrometer. Alright, that's probably good enough. I probably stirred it up a decent amount whenever I pour the extra water in there anyway. Let's take that and set it back up there. And let's see, give her a look. That looks like that did affect it. So let's let it kind of sit in there. Yeah, that affected the initial gravity reading. Now it's looking about right. What your beer should normally look like is 1.040 to 1.045 or 1.05. And that's looking at about 1.045, which is about, it's going to be about 5% or so alcohol per volume. So, next, we're just going to take this yeast. This specific yeast, this safe ale stuff, doesn't need to be rehydrated like a lot of other yeasts do. So you can essentially just open the packet, sprinkle it along the top, and then seal it up good. Sprinkled the yeast on top there. I'm going to take my top. These tops are a pain in the butt. You have to really press down on them to get them in there just right. Alright, good to go. Alright, take your airlock, fill it up halfway with water, make sure the top is in there secure. And this is also a pain in the butt with this one. Oh wow, what do you know, it just slipped right in this time. Last time, I blew the O-ring in there into the fermenter, had to dig it out, put it back in, and reinsert the airlock. Alright, so we're looking at about 77 degrees right now. This thing's got to cool down a bit. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a little trick. This house is normally pretty hot. It's usually around 75, 80 degrees Fahrenheit in here. Now that's going to be too warm for the beer to ferment. It's going to ferment too fast. You're going to get a lot of off flavors in there, kind of fruity flavors as a byproduct of that. So what you're going to do is, I've got this neat little cubby hole under my counter with an air vent and a fan plugged into an outlet. That's going to cool it down really fast. And what I usually do is I just take the fermenter and I just stick it in there. I take a beach towel and I wet it in the tub, rinse it out, you know, get all the excess water out of there, and then I wrap it around the fermenter. But I want to make sure that I can still see the thermometer pretty easily. Then I take two ends of the towel, fill up a bucket full of water, and put the towel ends in there. Now what this is going to do is, as the towel evaporates around, as the water in the towel evaporates around the fermenter, it's going to cool it off. As this evaporates up here, water is going to be soaked up through the towel to wherever it's evaporated. Your fermenting should finish in about 3 to 7 days. If you ferment it too warm, like around 75 to 80 degrees, it's going to finish in about a day and a half like my first batch did.